Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno and welcome to the second Sparky Dev Log. The Dev Log where we take a look at the game engine that I'm making, Sparky, and we see what I did in the past week and what my future plans are and all that fun stuff every single Monday. So, last time we did some debug menu stuff and essentially I kind of brought you guys up to speed as to what I did in the past week, which was basically creating this debug menu, which just allowed us to control values. And this week I've kind of started doing lighting stuff. I don't think any of this is committed really right now, but you can see that, like, for now, a scene basically has like a light setup, which is essentially just a bunch of lights, right? And from then, I think I'm figuring some kind of way out to maybe submit lighting setups to, or light setups to, like, render a 3D, right? So we've got like light setup submission and probably beginning to write some actual, I'm not sure if I did anything. Yeah, beginning to write some kind of lighting stuff in the shaders and just getting lighting to work really. And this is going to be pretty basic lighting to begin with. I just want to be able to, this has, of course, has nothing to do with the actual like lighting model that you're using. This is simply a way for the renderer to basically receive information about what kind of lights you have set up in your scene, right? So the problem that the problem that we're solving is basically, hey, we're making a game, for example, and we've got like, we're in test 3D and we're making our game. And basically, you know, we want to be able to set up our scene as needed with maybe like a directional light for the sun and maybe a few point lights. And we've got like this whole setup. So how do we get that from the game to the shaders where it actually has to be rendered? That's our problem, right? We have to create some kind of pipeline that takes us from point A to point B. So from the game side to the actual shaders all the way down the road when we actually start rendering things. So that's what this is all about, and I'm kind of still figuring out the best way to do that. But I just really haven't had too much time to work on it this week. Unfortunately, it's been a really busy week for me. I've been migrating the Cherno.com servers into a completely different server, and there's been all this stuff that's happened this week. Very exciting week. So I didn't have as much time, unfortunately, to work on Sparky as I wish I did. And this should be set up to be map mode. Anyway, that's kind of the idea of what I have been working on and what I'm going to be working on this week. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, because, you know, I didn't add too many things at all really this week, so there's not much to talk about. What I did want to do is actually go through a lot of what the future holds for Sparky. So I've opened up the Trello board, which you can all access by going to bit.ly/Sparky Trello. There'll be a link in the description. We're going to kind of go through this and we're going to triage it. So we're going to basically assign a priority towards all these things that need to be done. And we're probably going to add some other features as well. And this is a public board. You can all comment on stuff, and there'll be a lot of interactive things that you guys can kind of do to get involved. But basically, yes. So continuous integration. So the way that everything's made, by the way, if I show the menu and we can see the labels, the color coding is pretty simple. There's low priority things, which are green. There's medium, which is yellow. High, which is orange. Critical. So critical things are basically blockers, right? So these are like things that have to be done ASAP because they block other tasks from being done, right? Future is stuff that we'll probably explore in the far future, right? And then current is more or less in progress stuff, right? So stuff that I'm currently working on right now. So for example, lighting and that lighting setup thing would be an example of something that's current. So that's the color coding that we're going with, right? So we know that, for example, this stuff has high priority, control support as well, so has like high priority, and then like continuous integration is like medium. So continuous integration is something I would want to set up, and basically all that means is I've got like a build machine that every time I commit new code to Sparky, it essentially just does a build. Like it does a debug build and a release build and then commits those binaries to the repository. And that's just a good way to see that I haven't broken code. It's not as vital, or I haven't broken the build rather, but it's not as vital to do right now because we only support one platform, and basically if it compiles in Windows, then it's going to compile. Like if it compiles for me locally, it's pretty much almost guaranteed to compile for everyone, right? The only place that it would be useful right now is, say I forget to commit a file or something. Like I've added a file and I forgot to actually like add it to Git. Then of course the build would fail and I'd be like, oh, I've broken the build, and I'd be like, oh, it's because I forgot this file, right? So it's a good thing to keep around, just to make sure that that the repository is actually accurate, and that anyone should be able to build the code theoretically without any errors. But especially when we get like Mac and Linux going, and then maybe even other platforms like mobile, that will be way more important. Because if I like commit something, knowing me, like I wouldn't test it on all platforms. I'd just kind of commit code and see what happens. So if I kind of do some changes that are platform independent, and they happen to compile fine under, say, MSVC, but then under Clang or GCC or something, G++, they don't compile for some reason, or it generates excessive warnings or something, I'm not sure, but let's just say that it doesn't compile, then I would know, right? Because, yeah. So when we have like, when we start dragging in other compilers for other platforms, that will become much more useful. Better debugging support. I wish I added a comment here or a description that said what this was, but I assume this was kind of the debug menu stuff, because this was a while ago. So I assume that this was kind of the debug menu stuff and just generally being able to debug better. So that's always going to be high generally. Controller support. So that's adding, basically the ability to hook up controllers to your computer and basically get an event system going for that, where we can respond to controller events. So that's something that I've marked as high, just because it's not going to be too difficult to actually put in, and I think that it's kind of important in the sense that it's great to just, like, if you just want to make a quick game that you can even just, well, first of all, right, every engine should have this anyway. But I mean that to make a quick demo game, I think a good way to show off a demo is by using a controller, just because you can kind of stand back and let people look at the screen, and you don't have to be kind of with a keyboard and mouse in an inconvenient location. So it's a good thing. I want to do it quickly because it also gives you kind of the ability to make a quick game that you can just create maybe in a couple hours, or for Ludum Dare or something, and then you can just chuck it onto like the TV, and you can play it there with your friends or something. Really, I just want to get control support done like as quickly as possible. All right. So shader compilation issues on AMD cards. This is a bug. So this is under the bugs and issues category. This is a bug that I'm not even sure if, so investigate the relevance of this, because I'm really not sure whether or not this is actually still a thing, because I remember that this was like an issue on GitHub that I didn't fix, that was opened maybe 8 or 10 months ago. So because I've rewritten a lot of stuff, maybe I have solved this, but I'm not sure. So we are going to just probably add like a low label to it, just because I don't really care about it too much right now. If people do complain about this more, then I will bump it up. But for now, I'm not going to really worry about that. Also, I don't have access to any AMD cards. Yeah, like I'm not even going to, like I've got a few old laptops, I think, that have like ATI cards, but I don't use them really, because like, let's be real, who uses AMD? Anyway, the point is, I'm not trying to start a war. I don't really do that. Okay, WebGL texture issues. This is also something that needs investigation. Fix web build first, right? But it was pretty, this is much more urgent than this. Can I move this up? Maybe I should kind of keep this stuff sorted as well. Let's do that actually. So this is kind of what I want to do somewhat. All right, so we've got tools. So these are tools. So one of the biggest tools actually that I've forgotten is the CLI generator. So So this is just to generate this stuff, and I'm actually going to put that on medium because I want that done semi-quickly. So of course, what I mean by that is being able to wrap all the C++ code in CLI stuff, kind of like what we had with the Sparky CLI, although that was manual, whereas I want to write a tool that does that for you. And I need to add the tool to this repository actually. But basically all it would do is stuff like this, right? Where, and you can see how old this is, like this uses like the Sparky namespace and stuff like that. But all this would do is, basically just call the C++, do any kind of conversions that you need to do, such as marshalling and stuff, for that to work, but basically just wrap all the C++ calls in these CLI calls that can be accessed by C#. So that's, I want to do that because I want to be able to play around in C# with Sparky. And of course, by creating the CLI generator, I'm basically just adding C# as a language that you can use to make games in Sparky, right, for Windows. All right, so build tool and Visual Studio integration that I did not spell correctly. So let's just fix that up. Yeah, so a build tool is just going to be like a tool that you can use to basically format stuff for Sparky, right? It's not that necessary just yet because we don't have any custom formats. Like once we have this custom model format, obviously we need a way to go from our raw assets into the actual engine runtime format assets, right? So that's what the build tool will kind of be used for. So this is like low basically. And then Visual Studio integration, and also by build tool and Visual Studio integration, I'm also talking about having some kind of Visual Studio plugin that I can use to just build Sparky for the web, for example, right? So that I don't have to run like some kind of batch file and constantly update it with the files that I want to compile. I can just run that tool, run that plugin, and it'll just complete, right? It'll just automatically set up the web build and compile it with mscripten, right? So that's kind of like, I don't really care too much about that right now. So we're gonna mark that as low. And then the level editor, I do kind of want to make this level editor. So this is going to be, and I've been talking with this guy here about, he's been asking some questions about stuff, and there's some discussion going on here, which you can all check out. But basically, the idea for the level editor is just going to be a scene editor for now. We're not going to worry about stuff like scripting because we don't really have a scripting language in Sparky yet, and I still haven't decided which one I want to use. So still waiting on that. But when we do pick one, we'll probably integrate that with level editor. But for now, I just want it to be a way like where we can essentially just place objects and set up like the environment, set up lights, all that stuff for a scene, so that we don't have to do that in code. We can just kind of do that in the editor, and that will of course serialize into some kind of level format, which we can load at runtime. So serialization is kind of the blocker for this, really, because we can't do anything with level editor until the serialization stuff is done. I mean, obviously I could start writing like the GUI and stuff for this, but this is a big task. However, I do want it, I'm going to mark it as medium because I do want it to actually happen soon. So we're going to pop it up here, probably before this stuff, which also kind of brings me to serialization, which does need to be done. So this is actually going to be high because it's important. So we'll put it like maybe here. Because yeah, I mean, serialization, just making some kind of Sparky serialization format so that we can serialize our data and then deserialize it at runtime so that we can essentially load custom files, like custom file formats, such as the level file format that we create, and all of that stuff. That's very important, so we need to do that. Otherwise, we can't do level editor. Okay, cool. So 3D stuff. Forward rendering, deferred rendering, and custom model format. I'm also going to add physically based rendering, which is PBR, because that's going to be the primary workflow for Sparky. So forward rendering, I do want to pretty much finish that first. So this is going to be basically current, right? Because we are currently working on it. Deferred rendering is going to be high. I want to do that very soon. Custom model format is going to be probably fairly high, but I'll put it as medium. And then physically based rendering is also going to be high. So that's kind of the order that we're doing it in as well. So let's talk about this a little bit. So forward rendering is what we've got right now. And deferred rendering is what I want to implement very soon, possibly. Well, I want to have it fully working by the end of February, so by the end of next month. It should be completely working and perfect. As well as probably physically based rendering. So these two tasks really I want to have done by February. Now, whether or not because physically based rendering has nothing to do with deferred rendering. I could potentially do that first and set it up for forward rendering. In fact, I probably will do that. So we'll do physically based rendering first, perhaps. Maybe we'll probably do these at the same time, I think. But forward rendering is what we need to finish right now, which is all the kind of stuff that we had about our current way, which is just, submitting a bunch of objects, rendering the scene, not too much, whereas deferred rendering is rendering all of our scene initially to different buffers so that we can then reconstruct the lighting once we know, stuff like occlusion and what actually does get rendered so that we don't waste time calculating stuff for every single light in our frame. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about how that works now, but basically it's important for having like tons of dynamic lights, right? If you have I'm pretty sure like if you have more than two dynamic lights in your scene, then deferred rendering is going to be faster than forward rendering. So the only downside with deferred rendering is support, because you need to have multiple render targets available to you, which not all platforms support. For example, Glaze 2 does not support that. Glaze 3, I believe, does. I'm going to have to double check that, but I think so. All current desktops, of course, support that, but I'm just saying like some mobile devices don't. So there are a few limitations with it, but that's pretty much it. It's just pretty much better in every way, almost. And yeah, custom model format. We need a way to go from something like going from like FBX pretty much, which is probably what we're going to go from, to Sparky runtime format. So FBX is a model format, Autodesk model format, which is pretty commonly used in the industry, and it's not exactly optimized for runtime or anything, but it has all the information we need. So what we want to do is go from that format into a format that we design specifically for like loading speed, essentially, and efficiency. So we want to be able to have a Sparky model format that we can just chuck into the engine, and it's like it's already formatted in such a way that we can just kind of pop it into memory, and that's it. We don't need to parse it or add stuff to it. We can just take all we need. We can just basically take all that memory and put it into like an OpenGL buffer and then just render it, right? We want to make it as close to the actual runtime memory layout pretty much as we can, right? Because that means that we don't have to waste time like loading it and like converting it on the fly, right? We can do that offline. We can do that like before the game starts. So that's something that we need to do, of course, because I don't want to, like, currently the engine supports OBJ as its like only format. And you'll see stuff like that in the model class. That's all the model class has right now. If you look at this, so load will basically just go through the OBJ, like it's a text file, and parse it, and then insert vertices and indices and all of that stuff into here, and then eventually, of course, create the buffer. And right now, I think it doesn't even support like a bunch of stuff, but roughly, like, it'll work. That's how we actually get the cube and the sphere here. They're both OBJ files. So yeah, so we definitely need to do that. Okay, 2D stuff, API considerations. So what do I mean by API considerations? Well, I just mean cleaning up the API, adding all the missing features, and making it nice. So I just want to be able to basically clean up the API that we have. So what I mean by that is, if we go to render a 2D, I've kind of been adding stuff as I go along. So if we look at what we support, like for example, we've got draw line, we've got draw rect, we've got draw string, but like we're missing stuff like, what if we want to draw a circle? Like what if we want to fill a circle or an ellipse or something, or a triangle? you know, like we're missing a lot of these kind of primitive drawing things, as well as maybe like, for example, we might want to make more overloads for these, which take different parameters. I've done a pretty good job by just using a lot of default parameters, as you can see. So it's not that vital. This kind of makes our overloads a lot, a lot less of them like defined explicitly. But yeah, and just making sure that the batch renderer supports all these different things that we want to do, and making sure that the API is kind of complete, right? As well as making sure that, yeah, if we want to just render something, it shouldn't be necessarily too difficult to do, okay? So that's going to be kind of low because I actually think it's kind of all right for now. I want to put it as low. It's kind of all right. Optimizations as well. I don't really see the need to optimize it too much. I'm going to mark that as low. There are a few things. There are very few things. There are a few things we could do to optimize it. Most of this stuff is pretty good. Like the submission, I think, is fairly optimal. This is for drawing lines. If we look at yeah, submit. Like this stuff is kind of, yeah, like this stuff is very well optimized in terms of like it lines up with the CPU cache very well. And like we do recalculate this stuff, but we only do that because it's faster than actually caching them and retrieving them. So generally I think this is fairly well optimized. I'm not gonna go through it slowly now, but also I think it's fast enough as well. Like it's pretty good. There are potentially some things I think I haven't looked at draw string with my optimization eyes yet, so maybe that could be potentially better. And all of this stuff as well was kind of implemented in a hurry, but yeah, but generally I think it's good. Like it's good. I haven't had any problems with speed at all. Like I've just put optimizations there because I think at one point or two I would have noticed some things where I was like, oh, I could probably make that faster. Which is why it's also low priority. So proper layer material integration. What I mean by that is if we go to like our layer 2Ds, and this is of course in the 2D development list, so it's to do with that. You know, like layers right now, when we create a layer, so if we look at test layer, and this is of course a 2D layer. When we create it, we kind of specify a shader for it, and like an orthographic matrix for it, and that's kind of it. Like we don't we've kind of specified which shader we want to use for it, and then which matrix. But what I think instead we should do is kind of like what we did with test 3D, where we just had like materials, of course, because materials are essentially shaders with a bunch of parameters, right? And like textures potentially. That's like one of the parameters, one of the possible parameters. And then we of course create material instances and stuff like that. And the idea is maybe, you know, this should actually just take in like a material instance, essentially, right? Because we don't, of course, when we're rendering stuff as 2D layers and we're rendering 2D objects, they don't need separate shaders, right? Because there's really no such thing as that. You can, of course, set certain parameters for the shaders per object that you want to render. But sprites generally are rendered with the same shader. That's just how games typically work if they're 2D sprites. So because of that, I think the layers should have materials rather than sprites, of course. So that's just, you know, that stuff is, I'm going to mark it as medium just because it's not that big of a job, but it will probably make everything a lot better. Box 2D, I'm gonna mark it as medium, but it's more of a low because I don't really care too much about that right now. I'm doing graphic stuff for 3D, and I imagine I'll probably start doing like PhysX and 3D physics for 3D stuff. So, but this is more or less waiting on like the component system. So finish entity component system. Let's not make that capital. So this is also going to be kind of medium, I think. And then the UI framework stuff is probably going to be so we need checkboxes, text fields. Like I don't really care too much about that, to be honest, because we're not really working on that stuff right now. Let's move this down. Yeah, so we'll do that. But that's kind of the idea. All right, platform stuff, platform dependent stuff. So we've got Mac and Linux. Yeah, medium. Like, I do want to get that stuff done, but I also kind of want to make sure that we do the main engine first, because I have no need to support this right now. Like, obviously when you're releasing a game or something, you would want to support that, but for the development of the engine itself, pretty much never use okay, first of all, I never use Mac and Linux for development. Like, I use Macs kind of frequently, semi-frequently, but not for development, no. So I don't really care too much about that in the scope of development. But I know that you guys do, so that's why I've marked it as medium and not low, literally just because of you guys. Web, I would say, is in the same boat as that. And then mobile is going to be low priority because I don't care too much about that right now. It's something that I would like the engine to eventually support, but it's also not something that I'm going to just stop everything and start doing, because that's not an easy task either. And that's going to involve platform-specific code, like extensive platform-specific code for that. Like, I'm talking like Java and Objective-C for the platform layer. So I don't really want to do too much about that. Yeah, anyway, I think that's about it. So really, 3D development is kind of what I'm working on right now with forward rendering. So lights and light setups is in general exactly what I'm doing. In fact, I could probably just delete this. I think it might be a better idea to delete this. How do I delete this? Do I have to archive it? Can't I just archive? Whatever. So maybe I should add like a checklist for forward rendering. To do. So we could do stuff like lights and light setups. What else do we need to do? I think I want to fix up the uniform stuff. We've got like batching and sorting and textures. Oh man, there's a lot. So textures, batching, sorting, probably like visibility checking, and by that I mean stuff like culling. Yeah, which involves stuff like occlusion queries and like all of that stuff. And we probably want, what was that other thing that was on my mind? Uniform work. So like for shader uniforms. What was that big thing I was thinking of just then? That was like, oh, that's important. I should probably do that. Damn. What was I thinking of? Forward rendering. What else do I need? Oh, this is great. I like this to-do list though. So we'll do like, we'll do a few things that are already marked off. So, geometry mesh submission, which is done. So we'll kind of move that up. The render commands are pretty much done. Oops. It's a comment. See, we're already 25% of the way done, hey? I don't remember what I was gonna say, but it was pretty important and I've forgotten it, so lol. Yeah, so there's something about batching, sorting, visibility checking. Oh yeah, that's right, render flags. That's what I was gonna say. So render flags, probably gonna go around here and then we'll kind of uniform work. Render flags. We might do it in this order, I think. Yes. So by render flags, I mean like the renderer has to, like, you should be able to set certain flags for the renderer that you do in between draw calls, such as, like, an example would be stuff like blend states, but also like lighting setups is also like a flag, right? Or maybe like certain Like system uniforms and stuff like that as well is a good example of render flags. And like, for example, like are shadows on or off, like stuff like that, right? So this is kind of the dealio. So we've got a lot of stuff to do there. This stuff as well, like, goodness me, there'll be a lot of stuff to do for physically based rendering and deferred rendering. So that's a lot. But this column is kind of what I'm actually working on right now. You can see it's marked with purple as well. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this devlog. 30 minutes. How do people make devlogs that are like under 20 minutes long? I don't get it. This was a devlog, keep in mind, where I had absolutely nothing basically to show that I did in the past week, apart from like that lighting setup kind of just skeleton class, right? I basically did nothing, and somehow I still found 30 minutes of stuff to talk about, like regarding what I would do. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button, and of course, if you didn't enjoy the video, hit the dislike button and tell me why you didn't like it. Maybe I can improve your enjoyment of the future devlogs. You should also join the Sparky Slack, or just my Slack in general, which is of course slack.thecherno.com, where you'll be able to talk about Sparky all day long with people who are as interested in the project as you are. And you can just join the Slack basically by going to slack.thecherno.com. And of course, if you are a super fan and you really want to help out the development of Sparky and you want to see more videos, then you want to head over to my Patreon, where you can pledge a certain amount per month, and you will receive some cool rewards. And I have yet to come up with some Sparky rewards, but don't you worry. Now that I've got like a logo for Sparky and stuff, maybe I'll start making like mugs and t-shirts and cool stuff like that to give away to patrons and stuff like that. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next week with the devlog number 3. During the week, I'll probably put out that How Sparky Works video that I was talking about. So that'll be like midweek, maybe like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, sometime around then. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.